talk about the challenges that come with emerging technology, but also how we can address them from the perspective of a global technology company such as nChain. So why does it matter? The economist Deirdre McCloskey has argued that the single biggest driver for our modern prosperity today, the reason why we went from an average income until around 1800 of around $3 a day to $30 a day on average, an increase by a factor of 10. It all comes down to one thing: ideas. Innovation is the biggest ingredient to our modern prosperity today. Now, The Economist has looked at that, and they've found that the average output of a worker in the UK in 2010 increased from 98,000 to 108.5 thousand by 2019. And you see that across other regions. But funny enough, there's still many companies that don't adopt it. And there's several reasons behind it. Some of them might surprise you. I think growing regulation is an obvious one. The nature of new tech becoming ever more pervasive. But sluggish competition is a surprising factor. What can we do to increase competition? How can we position companies better for the future? And I think that there are two factors really to innovation. So one thing is innovative power itself, which is measured by patents usually. I'm proud to work for a company that has a large patent portfolio of more than 3,000 patent applications. But it's not the only thing. France, for example, is not as innovative as Japan in number of patents, but very good at spreading innovation. And so they have a very strong economy. And so it's always important to keep that in mind. And so you don't need to be a big inventor or a large holder of patents to be able to drive innovation. You can be good at spreading it. And that creates that two-tier economy between companies that drive innovation and others that don't. And companies that do drive innovation are significantly better off. And on this note, I just want to give a shout out to the organizers, Trescon, for organizing dates, because it's down to conferences like this that really make a difference, where ecosystem participants and representatives of government come together to drive future innovation. So what are the big things? I think AI is an obvious one. Then obviously blockchain technology that I'm going to talk about later on a bit more in terms of how we can address some of the challenges. Some of the other trends we see are digital payment, supply chain management, and some of that goes hand in hand when it comes to traceability of funds. And then another one that I foresee is super apps, and we'll talk about a bit more about that. But they have a few things in common, a few themes, and it comes down to data governance, identity management. Who controls and owns my data? It comes down to data integrity. How reliable or accurate is the data that I'm using? Can I actually rely on it? It comes down to data provenance, lots of privacy issues. Where does my data come from? What is the source? Then there are questions around the user interface. You will have seen the latest AI gadgets that you can clip onto your jacket and you can interact with it. So companies are thinking about how will this change the way we interact with technology? Is the smartphone going to be the future key tool, or are we going to see other devices? And then it comes down to a very interesting one, which boils down to content creation and monetization. There have been some limits with the current internet structure today, and there are ways of increasing the efficiency of that using blockchain technology through micropayments, something we're very excited about. In other words, how can we bring transparency, accountability, and integrity to emerging technologies? How do we safeguard privacy? How do we control ownership? And how do we safeguard the lawful adoption of emerging technology? So let's start with the big one. And there's a reason why I combine AI with cloud computing, because it's highly reliant on cloud computing, and a big reason why some of the big tech companies are such key drivers of the biggest AI applications today. But let's start off with a few maybe little surprising graphs, but still kind of shocking that around a third across different ages think that AI will actually mostly do harm, which is quite shocking and will certainly slow down adoption when people are skeptical. And they should be, right? Because it does come with certain challenges, but those challenges also come with opportunities. And that's what we're going to talk about. And not surprisingly, the number of incidences has gone up over the years, also in line with the increase of the adoption of the technology. And there's been very little regulation. You have the executive orders from Biden that are looking to address it. The EU is having its AI Act, which should serve as a modern standard in the West, just like GDPR did for privacy regulations. But it's not alone. It's not the only thing that will help. Regulation alone won't do it. We need to rely on innovation, drive innovation, encourage companies to innovate, to safeguard the lawful adoption and the safe use of it. These are some of the main applications that we see today. One that is not here, which is equally significant because it does drive enterprise use, so it won't be measured in this graph, which is measured by unique website visitors, is Anthropic. So we have OpenAI, which Microsoft has a stake in with 49%, but then you have Anthropic, which Amazon and Google have already invested in. And then you have other players in AI when it comes to not just generative AI, but predictive AI, where Meta is a key player. And then you have Google Cloud collaborating with Spotify to predict user behavior and feed them the kind of music they want to listen to. And so they're all big tech companies that are driving this game. So the question becomes, what can we do other than just be at the mercy of those big companies and collaborate with them, which we can do, but are there other ways to compete? And one way of looking at it is to look at the challenges that will come with AI and to position yourself for those challenges. Here are some of the big ones that we see when we read across the landscape of different industries. So I want to just pick out a few ones. Computing cost is an interesting one. So AI, when it came out, people weren't really considering the cost of it, but it's incredibly expensive. And again, the reason why big tech companies are driving this, because they have the large data centers to scale and bring down the average cost. At the same time, they're getting into the energy business. So this is another interesting convergence between emerging tech, cloud computing, and energy, but that's maybe a discussion for another day. Data monetization. So who gets rewarded for this? Is it just the AI application provider? Shouldn't it also be the author? But then what measures do we have in place to ensure that the author does get rewarded? And do we have payment mechanisms in place that are efficient enough to pay someone a penny every time someone issues a query? User privacy. What happens to my data that I feed to the AI application? Every time I search for something, they know something about me. When I let an application study my company data and history, what happens to that data? Are my employees' privacies at stake? There's very little transparency, very little verification. And so this is something we'll have to look at. One fascinating thing is that people don't think about how it's working, so they just see the benefit of it, and that's what's driving AI applications. But then there's a lot that comes with it that we don't think about and that we should address. Maybe one more I want to highlight is fraud detection. Again, predictive AI, very exciting area to be in. So to combine that with an efficient payment mechanism, a transparent record system such as blockchain technology, I think will be very exciting. So here are the big ones in summary, right? So it comes down to cost. How can we make sure this is actually cost efficient and sustainable? How do we make sure we ensure ownership rights? I keep my own data and I own it. There's lack of integrity controls. I don't know what I'm being fed is actually accurate. There's limited monetization. Content creators constantly complaining about how they can be rewarded, financially rewarded for the input that they're providing. And then we have a lack of privacy. And so we see this and we think about, okay, this is all very challenging and something that will be very difficult to address. But then what we see is that we actually had similar issues in other industries. And I liked what we heard yesterday from the Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister, is that we may not be able to predict the exact outcome of AI applications, but we can still assess the risk and bring in accountability measures to make sure that the people that do certain things can be held accountable. And we see similar trends in other industries, including the payments industry. And so one of the things you will have heard about is the explainability aspect, which is nothing else than the traceability of applications, including AI applications, which is a big topic in finance. How do we make sure we can trace funds when it comes to money laundering, terrorist financing? How can we recover digital assets? There's lots of talk about de-dollarization now with central bank digital currencies upcoming. That's a big one. And yet we see relatively little adoption, for example, of the digital rupee. But it's very good to see that this is actually happening as opposed to other regions. And so one thing that we, for example, do at Enchen, we help develop tools to more easily recover digital assets. And so there's this big myth in blockchain technology when it comes to owning your keys and owning your own funds. And the myth is that people say you need to own your own keys. And in other words, if I steal your keys, it's mine. And that's simply not the case. And that's never been the case in finance. And that's why it's important to educate and work not just with exchanges, but with miners directly to be able to more easily recover funds. And there are tools to do that where you don't necessarily need to involve exchanges. There are easier ways of doing that. And that's a big topic when it comes to the financing of Hamas, for example. And regulators need enforcement tools to be able to address and meet AML requiremements and anti-terrorist financing. The last one that I want to talk about is super apps. So Musk, I think, is going to be very excited about what he's going to do with X. It's going to turn it into not just a financial app, I think, but going to try and create an app experience where you can buy all sorts of things, have all sorts of experiences. When we think about what Zuckerberg will do with WhatsApp, we might be facing a very similar experience. But all those things come with certain challenges. How do we make it still usable? How do we make sure it scales, not just technologically, but how do we get, if I'm storing all my data cloud, how do we address privacy? One big thing we see here is the notion of a sovereign data is kept within their own borders. One we see is, even though we've seen very little adoption, companies are constantly working on things within one experience. And the experience you provide, bigger the challenge will be. Okay, so what can we do ways on how to address them? And I'm gonna talk about how blockchain technology specifically, I think, is best positioned to do that. So one is data integrity. How can is actually what it purports to be. It is how do I make sure that I maintain ownership of the data, goes a bit deeper. And data hygiene basically allows you to, where you also avoid data structure and incentive mechanisms for content that is more valuable, that is more used, because not every piece of art is the same. We just happen to use blockchain technology tradable. In other words, the secure with an open public blockchain in the PSV out there, and there's more that you can. In other words, immutability means if you do something wrong, there's a track record of it. If you cheat, there's a track record of it. No way to get rid of that. So if hackers try to do that, they can't cover their tracks. Decentralization is a big, fast, and stable system that others can build upon. It means you can rely on the integral in finance. To have an accountability, it's the nature of it. But if we do have a certain level of transparency, people will stop doing things if they know they're going to be caught. That doesn't, because the honest user can still maintain his privacy on an open blockchain. And chain means everything is timestamped. You know, so this, all of this, where we can get the transaction cost down. Exciting when you think about all the emerging immersive tech. Actually, you're rewarding people for incredibly efficient means. And when it comes to blockchain technology, one is reducing fraud, whether it's corporate fraud or money laundering, or to do with terrorist financing, which we will already. The other thing is financial inclusion, giving more and better access to people around the world to take part in the India, because is breathtaking, and that's a testament to the conference here and everything I've experienced so far. And so, thank you very much. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Sebastian, for sharing that presentation with us. Well, very crucial points addressed, like challenges of emerging tech, artificial intelligence. Thank you for sharing those statistics and some key issues with adoption of AI, blockchain, and why blockchain technology. So again, can we have a big round of applause for that presentation?